Welcome to the UFOs podcast, where we cover all things alien and UFO. Hey everyone, this is Jeff Zim. I'll be your host for the UFOs podcast, and this is the very first premiere episode, and so I figured why not talk about the biggest event that we've all known about, which is Roswell. So before we get into that, just know that the UFOs podcast was created to talk about all things UFO, alien, UAP, disclosure, pretty much anything related around these topics. I've been interested in this for a long time, ever since I was a kid, and it's just fascinating to think that you have all these different crash recoveries or supposed crash recoveries. You have, mutilations with cattle, you have abductions. There's just so much within this field that is just mind-blowing. And like with anything else in life, I'm sure there's parts that are true and parts that are false, and people make up things or want to be famous and all that, but there's got to be something to this. I've always felt that we can't be the only intelligence in this world, that there must be more in the universe, and I don't understand the mentality of thinking, well, we're humans, we're the best, we're the biggest thing out there, we're the apex predator. But no, there might be any number of other things out there, and I just think it would be silly to think that, we're the best of the best with regard to races of beings that might be out there and might have something completely different than what we have here, what we breathe and how we view the world. There are sensory organs and everything else. Who knows? There could be so many ways of looking at this. So anyway, if you go to ufos.com, our website, YOUFOSE, you can see all the podcast episodes. Of course, we'll have other things there eventually, like merch, which will be really cool. You could wear some UFO swag. We'll have some games and some fun things here and there. But also what I really want to put out there is we want to share your stories. So if you go to the website and you'll see there's multiple contact forms, just drop us a line. Let us know about a story that happened to you. When again, it could be completely anonymous. In fact, we're never going to use people's last names. We'll just use the first letter of the last name, or just give us fake names. Doesn't bother us at all. We just want your stories. We want this to be a safe place where we can put out the information and then let the audience decide on what they want to think about those stories or situations. Eventually, we'd love to have interviews with subject matter experts. And just basically have an awesome world that revolves around these topics. So let's get started with the first topic, which will be Roswell. So what happened in Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947? Something crashed there, and all these years later, we still have no clue what it might have been. The Roswell incident is by far the beginning of all of the UFO mythology. And it's also the first case where the government changed their message very quickly, overnight, in fact. And so I think that kind of caused the entire world to pay attention and to try to understand, okay, something's here, something happened, what exactly is going on, and why are they changing the story right away? And did that set a precedent for the rest of all these decades, because how many times you hear of something happening, oh, it was just a weather balloon, which is exactly what they said this was, by the way. And then you just sit there and you think, come on, don't talk down to us. Like, there are so many other things than swamp gas and things like that it could be, yet they continuously use those explanations and just expect the civilians to just accept it blindly and be okay with it. And that's just not right. So Roswell, it occurred weeks after a bunch of UFO sightings in the area around, I think, June 1947. So less than a month later, all this stuff happened. And what originally happened was there was a ranch hand, William Mack Brazel, and they were the foreman at the Foster Ranch. And they found debris that was scattered over a large area. It was estimated, I guess, over 1,000 feet. And they had all this material that they didn't understand what was going on. It had strange properties, evidently. They were saying it was very lightweight. It was metallic, but it wouldn't burn. It wouldn't dent easily. I do believe that they were saying it had a hard time, or they had a hard time tearing it. And it would almost, I think if you crumpled it, it would go back to its original form, which is interesting. And so what originally happened, this rancher, Brazel, they reported it to the local Roswell Army Airfield, the RAAF. And of course, the military comes out, they collect the debris quickly, and allegedly they sealed off the area. Now, again, this happened so long ago, who knows what the actual truth was. But I remember people talking about they saw them, hauling things off, and there was some type of disc-shaped object. And then after that, basically all hell broke loose within the media, because originally it was taken seriously by the military, according to Brazel, way back when in 1947. And the main officer involved, he was an intelligence officer called Major Jesse Marcel. They were the main person that led this investigation into what was going on with the ranch. And they were also in charge of course, bringing back the debris and whatever else might have been there. But the interesting thing is, we'll get to this in a second. So the very next thing, I'm jumping ahead of myself because the story is so interesting. So the day, I think after, or 2 days after, there was a bombshell press release that the RAAF issued saying that the Army Air Force has recovered a flying disc. Now, this is massive. You wouldn't really hear of this happening nowadays unless, of course, it was such a big sighting, like maybe the Phoenix Lights or something like that. I think in around 92, 94, I can't remember. That will be a future episode, by the way. Unless it's something that has so many people, thousands of people actually seeing it, maybe I could see the military saying something a little bit more closer to the truth, although, let's be honest, probably not. But anyway, they could not believe that they put out something like that, actually saying they recovered a flying disc. Now, this made headlines, not just locally in newspapers, but around the world. Everyone was transfixed on Roswell, and they were trying to figure out, oh my gosh, we're not alone. Why are we being visited by other people, or not even people, but other beings? And so what ended up happening was, this was the only time that the military ever officially used the term flying disc. But within 24 hours, the story completely changed. They basically said, this is just a weather balloon. And there was a famous, very, very famous photo, probably one of the most famous out there for ufology, with Jesse Marcel, again, the intelligence officer, sitting or kneeling down by a bunch of debris that's in front of him. And they just claimed it was a weather balloon, and it just didn't make any sense. It didn't make sense for a couple of reasons. One, it did not match, the debris at least did not match the way the rancher Brazel was speaking about it and describing it. And why would they recant on calling it a disc? I mean, I don't remember the actual, if anyone ever had like sizing of this potential disc. I don't know if anything was ever seen to that degree of specificity, but why would you go from a disc, which would have to be much bigger than a weather balloon, and then just randomly say it's a balloon? Come on. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, it really is very strange. And way later on in life, even Marcel himself said that that wasn't the material that we recovered. That even he admitted way later on in life that this was a government cover-up. So it's one of those excruciatingly frustrating things where they're the military. I mean, what are you going to do? How can you just get the truth? Especially back then. Maybe now there'd be different ways because so many people have cell phones and things like that. But they're even more powerful now. So I don't know. It seems very daunting and very frustrating to try to think, well, how could you even contact the government to figure out the possible truth? So basically, yeah, Major Jesse Marcel, he maintained until his death that the debris was not a weather balloon. Also, and this is fascinating to me, that he claimed there were unusual symbols on metal beams, and they were described as being hieroglyphic-like. Now that to me is just fascinating. I mean, ancient Egypt is another thing that just has always fascinated me, and I definitely want to visit. I haven't been there yet. But what in the world would that mean? Why would they have hieroglyphic-like symbols on this craft? And then how could you then say that, oh, it was just a weather balloon? And there's also other things that don't make any sense. there were a few civilian witnesses. One was a funeral home director, Glenn Dennis, and they claimed, in addition to nurses, that saw these beings come in. So supposedly, so when they brought in these beings, and they're described as non-human bodies, both Glenn Dennis, the funeral home director, and these nurses that were there, they claimed that these were definitely not human. I mean, they supposedly saw them, or at least partially they saw these bodies. And to me, that goes along with the whole idea of it being a crashed disc. And then, of course, they would never admit to something like that. And supposedly, and this is, again, all these things, it's so hard to really track or prove in any way. These civilians that had witnessed this stuff, there were alleged threats for them to remain silent, which, again, that's something that we've heard from that point forward, all these decades later, that the government will come in and try to shut you down immediately if you did actually see something. And then, of course, way later on in life, children of a lot of the military personnel that were involved with Roswell, they said that their parents privately admitted that, no, it was not a regular aircraft. And so you have to just think, gosh, it's just amazing. I get it from a top security standpoint, or like a top security clearance, that when you're in the government, you cannot talk about this stuff, because if you do, not only one, you're gone, you're not going to be working anymore in that field, but two, they'll try to, attack your person and your character. They will besmirch who you are as a person. They could even, I mean, these are all accusations that are neither here nor there, but it's just funny to think that we've heard these same types of things so often with a lot of other types of crash recoveries or supposed alien crashes. So the funny thing, too, about this is most of this testimony from military personnel, their family members, things like this, decades after it actually happened, it took like 30 to 40 years for this type of testimony to come out, meaning these people were scared, most likely. Let's just assume it was true that Roswell happened and it was a crash. Imagine that. Imagine that you saw something happen that you cannot explain. And then now all of a sudden, the military that you've worked for however many years tells you, hey, shut up, keep your mouth shut, or you're going to be sorry. I mean, the intimidation that must happen with these types of things is gigantic. And so I can't blame them for keeping a secret, whether it be just to keep their job, to not have to deal with ridicule. Some people might even think they're going crazy or they're nuts or something. So I get why they would be hesitant to talk about it. And, the other question is, well, is a deathbed confession valid or not? I mean, people could say, well, they would probably attack a person if they're dying in bed. They're basically at the end of their life. Well, they could say anything, but why? I mean, it depends on the person. There could be some people that would probably just create something just to have somewhat of a legacy of a story that would keep going after their death. But it just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like I could see saying some things in life if you're getting ready to pass on. But when you hear about the testimony from a lot of ex-military when they are on their deathbed, or something happens to where, they lock something away somewhere and then the family finds it years later or after their death, why would they do that? I mean, it just seems a little suspect. There's always a case for, again, creating up a story just to do it. But I feel more often than not, a lot of these stories, it just lends more credibility that they saw something that they did not understand. Does it have to be alien? No. But it's one of those things where they were shook. I mean, you hear these countless testimony from people that have experienced these things, and they oftentimes don't even want to talk about it. They're so, it's just disrupted their life so much. So here's some interesting things that happened later on in life. So this originally happened in 1947, but in 1994, I guess through 1997, the Air Force reported that the Roswell debris was actually from something called Project Mogul. And Mogul was a top secret program and they used high altitude balloons. And they claim that they were designed, these balloons, to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Now, you could say whatever you want. All these decades later, revisiting Roswell in general is kind of interesting, but I think that could just be because as time has gone by, it's so much more in front of people now. All these ideas of aliens and things have been in movies and been in pop culture so much. I mean, it's almost laughable sometimes. People would create some aliens and things that are just funny or to make fun of the whole idea of aliens. But it's just interesting that they took that long to come out with some official explanation, and they just randomly talk about how Mogul was a Cold War. Tried to ease Cold War tensions. Nuclear intelligence was classified higher than aviation programs, and on and on and on. But the problem with it, again, the materials that are described in Mogul or Project Mogul, they don't match the witness accounts at all. And same thing that what we talked about earlier with the rancher, Brazel, it did not match what he saw on his property. I mean, over 1,000 feet worth of debris. And so that's a major thing right there. And then they also, I guess, the Project Mogul flights around the Roswell area weren't documented very well. It still does not explain anything about the flying disc press release. I mean, that alone should be the smoking gun. Why in the world would you describe something as a flying disc and then immediately, within 24 hours, completely change your mind? That just does not make any sense. And then, of course, the threats that were made to civilians, allegedly, that why would they make threats if it was something like a weather balloon? I mean, it really just doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. It's one of those questions that you are fascinated to try to find out about. And then the other weird thing, so another Air Force follow-up in 1997, they claimed the bodies were anthropomorphic crash test dummies. And they claimed, they were used in different experiments around the 1950s. But again, the people that claimed they saw these bodies that were not human, I feel like I remember reading reports that there was a strong, extremely pungent smell to the bodies, that people that were nearby them experienced weird, physical issues and health problems. Roswell is a little bit different, of course, than more modern sightings where people were supposedly in contact with alien beings, because sometimes people, and we'll get to this in other shows, of course, sometimes people will claim that they have radiation burns. Some people have died from strange reasons just by being near either a craft or one of these aliens. The craft makes a lot of sense because of, whatever potential power that they're using for propulsion. But anyway, it's just fascinating. It's so weird to think that they are basically just saying they're dummies. And yeah, there's a lot of, there's still more issues that don't make any sense with this. The eyewitnesses that claimed that were in that hospital, the nurses and the doctors that claimed they saw these beings, they also said they were short, meaning way shorter than human, almost like childlike. They had large heads, which everyone understands what I mean when I say large heads with the big black eyes. How in the world could you say that that's a human? That doesn't make any sense. And of course, they had other non-human features. Oftentimes you'll hear about how they had a very thin slit for the mouth, that there wasn't really any type of nose per se. There was really no type of muscle tone whatsoever, just long, spindly appendages, basically. And it just doesn't, again, it just doesn't make any sense. We know what a human body looks like. Even if it's someone that's disformed in some way or disfigured, or especially if it was a crash and they got injured, you can still tell that it's a human. You can still, quote unquote, pick up the pieces and figure out what this is. And none of this matched. So it really didn't make any sense. And, from Roswell, it really fueled so many different things like Area 51 mythology, crash retrieval theories, government alien secrecy narratives, all sorts of things. So yeah, I'm not sure how many people would believe what, the straight edge line that the government gave about being weather balloons and, they were just crash test dummies. It just doesn't make any sense. So really, Roswell is the main event that kind of sparked all of this information about aliens, UFOs, and all these different things. Plus, remember, if you look at cinema around that time in the 1950s and 60s, you just see so many science fiction movies. And yes, you can consider them kind of dorky, or they're kind of low rent when it comes to graphics and things like that. But this was a long time ago. So why I'm bringing it up is more what fueled all of this. I mean, humans have always had a very strong imagination, but it's just fascinating to me to think that so many different events capture the same types of things. Okay, generally aliens look this way, and they seem to be only a few different ways, and it always kind of matches throughout the years. The smells and the hieroglyphics and the weird energy kind of reactions when you get close to these objects. That stuff has never really changed in all this time, in all these decades. And again, you could simply say, oh, well, yeah, people have heard these stories so many times, so they're just going to say the same thing, and they're fueling that same way of looking at this type of phenomenon. But I'm not so convinced. I think there's probably, where there's smoke, there's fire, quite literally sometimes. And so I think that maybe all these things happened for a reason. They're trying to tell us something, trying to, advance us. I know I'm jumping around topics, but there's a lot of people that think, well, aliens gave us technology in the past, such as transistors and fiber optics and things like that, that was actually back engineered from crash recoveries. So I don't know. It's fascinating. It really is truly fascinating. But why Roswell still matters, I mean, it's been referenced in the David Grush whistleblower claims, again, crash retrieval programs, reverse engineering narratives. I mean, it fits the same type of thing that seems to happen with every type of major alien event, or I shouldn't say alien because we don't know if it's alien, with any type of crash retrieval program or anything remotely like that. It's always the same. The government has the initial acknowledgement, all of a sudden there's a rapid denial, and then there's decades of secrecy. It's the same thing. It just keeps happening. There's other stories that we'll cover in other episodes, like Rendlesham Forest. There's things that have happened in all over the world. And so how can you say that they have so many commonalities that this is just figments of our imagination, or it just was something completely different? It just doesn't make any sense. So really, Roswell, you could look at it a bunch of different ways. You could say, well, whether you believe it or not, it did set the framework for how UFO incidents are handled by the government, and why a lot of the public just does not believe or trust official statements by them. It doesn't make any sense. So the other question is, if Roswell did happen today, which we have had other things that were similar, but I guess not as big as the story back then. If something like that happened today, if Roswell happened today or tomorrow, what would change? Would it be the identical thing? I mean, a lot of people now, of course, have videos, phones, and things that they could create media immediately right there on the spot. Would that help change the government narrative? I don't know. It's so hard to understand. And basically, when it comes down to it, when you think about Roswell and overall, the things that we knew, something crashed. We know something happened. There was debris. There were all these sightings beforehand leading up to it. We don't know exactly what it was, but still, something crashed. Something happened. The biggest bombshell is definitely that the government changed their story. Within 24 hours, they changed the story. How in the world can you say something like, there's a flying disc, and then just recant that overnight? That's just silly. And the witnesses that were there, the rancher, other family members, even government family members, they all stood by their claims for decades. I mean, they really didn't change the story. Now, again, sure, if you're a good liar, you'd be good at that. It would be easy. But again, so many of these stories, it just doesn't make any sense. You have people that existing in a bunch of different fields, even police officers and all sorts of different people that have varying levels of credibility when these types of events happen that should be more credible than, okay, maybe an average civilian, and they're still saying the same things. They talk about the craft, they talk about the bodies, they talk about smells, they talk about the energy and the technology, the sound sometimes, although typically there's no sound at all. But even that alone, the lack of sound is still something. It doesn't make sense. So what we don't know about Roswell, well, what was the debris extraterrestrial? We don't know. I mean, if people even have the debris anymore, which I'm sure they do somewhere, only they know. Or not. They might have it, but they still might not know what it is. Another one, of course, is whether or not bodies even existed. You have some eyewitness testimony, but as with any type of trial, eyewitness testimony can often be wrong. It could be falsified. It could be the person literally thinks that they're talking about something that actually happened, but memory is a very fallible thing. And so you really can't even use that as a concrete evidence. And also whether the truth is still classified. We'll never know that. The only people that know that are very few and far between in the military. I've read articles that have basically talked about, even if you have top secret security clearance or top secret clearance, there's higher things than that. There's things that no one in the military knows except the people that have them, which is crazy. So yeah, there might not ever be a way that any of us will fully understand what happened there. So my question for the listeners, what do you think? Do you think Roswell was real, first of all? If it was real, what do you think it was? Do you think it was extraterrestrial? Was it something else? I'd love to hear your responses. You can write into us. Again, if you go to ufos.com, you could fill out the contact forms that are all over the place. Or you can contact us directly with our email, which is stories@ufos.com. And again, that's YOUFOSE. And so this was the very first episode. I'm sure things will get better, a bit cleaner, excuse my pauses and things. But as we keep going, I want to grow this as much as possible. I really want to include user stories from around the world. If you have pictures or video, of course, sometimes, it's harder to tell because a lot of that can be faked. But if you have real things that you've really felt happen, please submit them to us. Again, we'll protect your anonymity. And don't ever send us something that's classified, of course. We don't want to do that. But just have an open mind. And we're just trying to explore this universe and try to understand what really exists and what's truly out there. So thank you again for listening. Please subscribe. Let your friends know. Let everybody know the UFO's name. And we'll get back to you with the next episode soon. We should probably have new episode weekly. I'm going to try to do Wednesdays for now, but that might change. But yeah, right now we're thinking it's going to be every Wednesday. We'll have about a half hour or so episode, and then we'll go from there. So please give me your feedback if you'd like to see anything changed, and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.